There is nothing, not darkness. Darkness is something. Darkness has presence, has texture, occupies space. This is before space. This is before matter. This is before time itself, which means there is no before, because before requires a clock, and no clock exists yet. There are no atoms, no distance between things, because there are no things to be between. No silence, because silence requires air. No emptiness, because emptiness requires space to be empty in. There is nothing. Absolute. Total. Violent in its completeness. And then, God speaks. One sentence. 4 words in the original Hebrew, and the nothing tears open. This is not a story about religion versus science. This is not a story about 6 days versus 13 billion years. This is not a story about a debate that has been running since Charles Darwin was still in school. This is the story of the most violent, most beautiful, most statistically impossible event in the entire history of existence. And why it ends with you. Stay with me. There is a question that has haunted every physicist who has ever stared at an equation too long. Every philosopher who has sat alone at 3 a.m. with nothing but a cold cup of coffee and a problem they cannot solve. Every person who has ever stepped outside on a clear night, looked up at a sky burning with light, and felt, inexplicably, completely, small. The question is not what the universe is made of. Science has mostly answered that. The question is not how old the universe is. We have measurements, give or take a few 100 million years. The question is this: why is there something rather than nothing? We will come back to that. I promise you we will come back to that. And when we do, the answer will not be what you expect, and it will change the way you see your own face in the mirror. But first, the nothing, and the moment, 13.8 billion years ago, when a voice spoke into it. The Hebrew word is bara. You need to understand what this word means before we go any further, because it changes everything. In the entire Hebrew language, thousands of words, thousands of years of literature, bara is used exclusively for God. Human beings make things. We build, we craft, we assemble, we invent. The Hebrew word for that is asa. But bara, calling matter into existence when there was no matter to begin with, creating something from absolute nothing, that word belongs only to God. No human being in the entire Bible is ever described with it, not a single one. And in Genesis chapter 1, it appears exactly 3 times. We will come back to that. But first, the world before the first word. Genesis does not begin with light. It begins with tohu wabohu, a Hebrew phrase that translates roughly as formless and void. But those English words do not carry the weight of the original. Tohu wabohu is not simply empty. It is violently, chaotically, crushingly empty. The kind of emptiness that presses down on you. The kind of nothing that has texture. Some scholars translate it as a desolate wasteland, a ruin before anything was ever built, and hovering over this wasteland, the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God. But you need to know that Ruach in Hebrew means 3 things at once: spirit, wind, and breath. And the verb used here, mereshaphet, describes the motion of a mother eagle circling above her nest. Not stationary, not passive, circling, protective, waiting. Here's what most people miss. God was already there before he spoke. He was hovering over the nothing, not because he needed to prepare, but because what was about to happen required his full presence. The universe was not a reflex. It was not spontaneous combustion. It was a decision. And then he spoke. Let there be light. 4 words in English. 3 in Hebrew. Yehi Yor. And the nothing did not resist. The nothing did not push back. The nothing had no choice, because the voice that spoke was the same voice that made the nothing possible in the first place. Light tore through the void at 300 million meters per second. Stars had not yet formed. Planets did not exist. There was nowhere for the light to go. It went everywhere. And this is the moment Job chapter 38 describes. When God turns to a broken man in a wasteland and asks him a question that no human being can answer. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? When the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? They were there. The angels witnessed it. They did not create it. They could not stop it. They could not explain it. They could only watch, and they could not stay quiet. The universe's first audience was not human beings. It was heaven itself. The days that followed moved like a military campaign pressing into enemy territory. Day 2. God separated the waters, above and below, the atmosphere forming, the chaos being pressed into order one boundary at a time. Day 3. Dry land emerging from the ocean, plants covering the ground, green spreading across a world that had been formless hours before. Day 4. And this is the moment you should stop and think about. God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. Notice the sequence. Light came on day 1. The sun came on day 4. Every civilization surrounding ancient Israel worshipped the sun. The Egyptians called it Ra, the highest god, the giver of life. The Babylonians built their entire calendar around it. The Canaanites made offerings to it. And Genesis chapter 1 describes the sun as a lamp, a functional light source. God does not name it. He does not consecrate it. He says, in effect, here are 2 lights, a larger one for the day, a smaller one for the night. Move along. The stars, created in a single half sentence. He also made the stars, thousands of galaxies, billions of solar systems, distances so enormous that the light leaving them right now will not reach your eye for another 1,000,000 years, mentioned in passing. As if the entire observable universe was an afterthought, as if God was thinking about something else. He was. Day 5. Creatures fill the sea and sky. Whales, eagles, everything between, spoken into existence with the same ease as light. Day 6 begins, and something shifts. Every creature before this moment, God commanded into existence. A word, an instant. Done. But now the rhythm changes. The pace slows. The land animals come first, and then, when they are finished, the narrative does something it has not done once in the previous 5 days. God pauses. In a story that is moved at the speed of a divine command, there is a moment of deliberation, consultation. The Hebrew suggests a conversation held within the nature of God himself. A counsel, a decision made not in haste, but with full intention. And this is where it gets remarkable. He says, "Let us make mankind in our image." Not make mankind exist. Not I will call another species into being. Let us make in our image. The word Salam. A word that, in the ancient Near East, had only ever been used for one thing. We will get there. But understand what just happened. In 5 days, God made light and darkness, oceans and mountain ranges, sun and moon and stars uncountable, creatures in the sea and sky, and on the land. He spoke every single one of them into existence without pausing, without deliberating, without slowing down. Only one creation made him stop. Only one creation required a counsel. That creation was you. We have watched the universe be born from nothing. We have seen light tear through a void that had no edge and no floor. We have seen 5 days of creation move at the speed of a divine command. And then, on the 6th day, a pause that changed everything. But the most important moment in this story has not happened yet. Before we get there, if this video is asking questions you have carried for a long time, subscribe now. Every week, we go this deep into Scripture, because what comes next is the part that keeps physicists awake at night. In 1953, a British astronomer named Fred Hoyle was trying to disprove the Bible. Not directly. He would not have framed it that way, but Fred Hoyle was the man who coined the phrase, the Big Bang, as a term of mockery. He believed the universe was eternal, that it had always existed, that there was no beginning, and therefore no beginner. He spent years building mathematical models to prove it, and then he started calculating carbon. Carbon is the foundation of all life on Earth. Every cell in your body is built from it. Every protein, every strand of DNA, every thought you have ever had was made possible because carbon atoms can bond with other atoms in intricate, precise ways. Without carbon, there is no biology. There is no you. Carbon is made inside dying stars. When a star burns hot enough and long enough, it fuses smaller atoms together to build larger ones. 2 helium atoms fuse to make beryllium. Then a third helium atom must collide with that beryllium at exactly the right energy level to produce carbon. If that energy level is slightly too high, the carbon flies apart before it can stabilize. Slightly too low, the carbon never forms at all. Hoyle calculated what that energy level had to be. Then he walked into a laboratory and told the physicists what they would find when they measured it. They measured it. He was right. The nuclear resonance level of carbon is 7.65 mega-electron volts. Not approximately. Not within an acceptable range. Exactly. The precise number that allows carbon to form inside stars, to survive long enough to be scattered across the universe when those stars explode, to land on a cooling planet and become biology, and become you. Fred Hoyle, atheist, lifelong skeptic, the man who spent his career arguing against a beginning, stared at that number and wrote these words. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics. He called it a put-up job. He never said the word God. He never converted. But he could not explain that number. Nobody could. But it gets stranger. In 2004, the mathematician Roger Penrose published a calculation about the beginning of the universe. Specifically, about the extraordinarily precise, low-entropy state our universe started with. He calculated the probability of a universe beginning with the degree of order that ours did. The number he arrived at was 1 in 10 raised to the power of 10 raised to the power of 123. Let me put that in terms you can feel. Take every atom in the observable universe, not just on Earth, not just in our galaxy, but in every galaxy that every telescope has ever detected. Use each one of those atoms as a single zero in the number. You would not have enough atoms. You would not even be close. This is not a calculation error. This is not a rounding problem. This is not a number you can set aside and move on from. This is a universe that had no mathematical business existing. And yet here it is. And here you are, standing inside it. Stephen Hawking spent 40 years trying to understand why. In 1988, he published A Brief History of Time, a book that sold over 25 million copies to people who wanted to understand the universe and found that the universe refused to be fully understood. In it, he wrote one sentence that he never answered. What is it that breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe? What breathes fire into the equations? He was still asking that question when he died in 2018. Cambridge lost its greatest mind, and the question remained open. Genesis chapter 1 answers it in 8 words. Here's the part nobody tells you. 1600 years before Hawking, a bishop in North Africa sat at a writing desk by lamplight and asked the same question from the opposite direction. His name was Augustine of Hippo. He was one of the sharpest minds the ancient world produced, and he had spent the first half of his life running from God before spending the second half writing about almost nothing else. Augustine asked the dangerous question, the one his critics use to mock the faith. What was God doing before he created the universe? And Augustine's answer shook philosophy for 15 centuries. Time, he said, is a created thing. There was no before creation, because before requires time, and time did not exist yet. God did not create the universe inside of time. He created time along with the universe. The universe did not appear in time. Time appeared with the universe. Scientists in 2026 call this the initial singularity, the moment before which the laws of physics do not apply, cannot apply, break down entirely. Augustine called it Genesis. He arrived there in the 4th century with lamplight and ink, 1600 years before anyone had a particle accelerator. And here is what that means, what it really means. There was no moment when nothing decided to become something. There was no fluctuation in a pre-existing void, because there was no void. There was no void because there was no space to be void in. There was nothing. And then there was everything. Not gradually, not by accident, not as a result of physical laws that happened to be in place, because no physical laws existed yet. One voice, one decision, one bara, and you are standing inside the result, not as a spectator, not as a side effect of something larger, as the point. But before we can understand what that means, we have to understand what you are made of. And when you find out, it will be humbling. And then it will be the most extraordinary thing you have ever heard. The dust was ordinary. That is the first thing you need to understand about the creation of the first human being. Not a celestial material, not something rare or luminous, not gathered from the heart of a star. The Hebrew word is Adamah, ground, red clay, the stuff that sticks to your sandals when it rains, the material you walk across without noticing, twice a day, every day of your life. God reached down into it, every other creature on the 6th day, spoken into existence, a command, an instant, done. The leopard did not require God's hands. The eagle did not require God's attention at close range. They required one sentence, and they were alive. But for the creature made in God's image, something different was required. God formed him. The Hebrew verb suggests the slow, deliberate work of a craftsman, the same word used for a potter at his wheel. Pressing, shaping, working the clay into a form that had never existed before in the history of the universe. And then he stopped. The form was complete. It lay in the ground, every bone correctly placed, every organ in position, every neuron in its location. By every measurable physical standard, it was a human body. It had the architecture of life. It had the structure of consciousness. But it was not alive. It was not conscious. It was not anyone. And here, exactly here, the third bara arrives. Remember, bara appears exactly 3 times in Genesis chapter 1. The first, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, matter itself, space, time, physical reality called from absolute nothing. Science calls this the Big Bang. It cannot explain what caused it. The second, when God created living creatures, the leap from chemistry to biology, from reaction to reproduction, from molecule to life. Scientists have been attempting to recreate that leap in laboratories for 70 years. They cannot do it. And the third bara, the final one, the one the entire chapter has been building toward, is here, lying in the dirt. So God created mankind in his own image, not spoken, not commanded from a distance, breathed. God bent down. The God who made galaxies with a sentence, who calibrated the carbon resonance of the universe to 7 decimal places, who exists outside time itself, bent down over a handful of clay and pressed his face close enough to touch it, and breathed. The Hebrew word is nishmat chayim, the breath of life, not ruach, not the wind or hovering spirit of Genesis 1 verse 2. This is a different, more intimate word. The breath that passes between two faces close enough to feel each other's warmth. And the dust became nefesh chaya, a living soul, a conscious being. Not merely a creature that moves and feeds and reproduces, but a being that knows it exists. A being that can ask questions. A being that can stand outside on a clear night, look up at a sky full of light, and feel the weight of not knowing why. Pay attention to this. Why is there something rather than nothing? We planted that question at the very beginning. You have been carrying it through everything, through the void, through the 6 days, through Fred Hoyle and Roger Penrose and a bishop writing by lamplight in North Africa. Here is your answer. The universe exists because God wanted someone to be inside it, with him. Not observing from the outside, not cataloging from a safe distance, living inside it, knowing it, naming it, tending it, speaking back to the one who made it. You are not a side effect of creation. You are the reason for it. The third bara was not an ending. It was an introduction, and he was not finished. From Adam's Tzela, mistranslated for centuries as rib, but the Hebrew word means side. God formed Eve, not from dust this time, from a person already alive, already breathing, already carrying the image of God in every cell. She did not require a separate breath. The breath was already in her. 2 people, same origin, same image, same breath, tzilim. In the ancient Near East, when a king ruled a territory too vast to govern in person, he would place a tzilim throughout it, a carved statue bearing his likeness, standing in a distant province, saying without words, I am here. My authority is here. This land is mine. God placed his tzilim in the garden, not stone, not carved cedar. 2 people made of clay and breath and love, bearing his likeness, carrying his authority, standing inside the creation he had spoken into existence from nothing. Every human being born since that morning carries that image. Every face you have ever passed on the street, every person who has ever made you angry, made you laugh, made you grieve, every child you have ever loved, every stranger whose name you never learned, all of them, tselem, royal representatives of the Creator, placed inside his creation, not observers, not accidents, image bearers of the King. 3 things to take with you. First, the word bara appears exactly 3 times in Genesis chapter 1, at the creation of matter, at the creation of life, and at the creation of human consciousness. Science has instruments powerful enough to detect gravitational waves from the edge of time. It has telescopes that see light from 13 billion years ago. It can describe what happened in the first fraction of the first second after the universe began. But it cannot cross those 3 thresholds. It cannot explain matter from nothing. It cannot explain life from chemistry. And it cannot explain why, when God bent down over the clay and breathed, the clay became someone who could wonder about God. Those 3 baras are the edge of what physics can reach. On the other side of that edge, Genesis was already waiting. Second, you are Adama, clay, dust, fragile and temporary, made of the same material as the ground beneath your feet. You will return to it one day. But before you do, you were shaped by hands. You were breathed into by a face that bent close enough to touch. Your existence does not have the fingerprints of randomness on it. It has the fingerprints of a maker. Third, and this is the one that matters most. You, Artzelum, before you had a name, before you drew your first breath, before you made a single choice or spoke a single word or did a single thing that could be measured or judged or evaluated, you were chosen to carry the image of the King of the universe into the world he built from nothing. Not because of anything you have done, because of who made you and what he decided before the first morning, before the first light, before the first word broke the silence of the void, to put inside you. Which moment in this story hit you hardest? The light tearing through the nothing, the breath pressed into the clay, or the moment you understood what Selim means? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. In the beginning, there was nothing. And then there was everything. And somewhere inside everything, there was you. That was never an accident. It was always the plan.